that long. We have 8 50-year attorneys this year. This is the most we've ever had, by several. And at this point, I want to introduce to you our 8 honorees and their family members or guests who are here with us today, and also their presenters, because we want to make sure you know who all of our honorees are, in case we run a little short of time at the end. We've asked our presenters to try to keep their comments to 5 minutes, please, because we do have 8, and we want to make sure that the last couple of our honorees have as much attention from our group here today as the first couple of honorees. And yet we're mindful that people do need to leave and get back to court, that sort of thing. Our first honoree, and I'm going to ask the honorees to stand at this time, and also ask their family members or guests to stand with him. Our first honoree is Ruffin Bailey, and presenting for him today will be Wright Dixon, and Ruffin's wife Nell Bailey is here today with him, and their daughter Jane. Our next honoree is Tom Ellis, and presenting for him is Chuck Neely, and with Tom today is his wife Jeanette Ellis. Also, we have Richard Ford. Presenting for him will be Roy Davis of the Asheville Bar. And with Richard is his daughter Lucy Segerson and son Richard Ford. In addition, one of our honorees today is Ed Friedberg, and today presenting for him is Cater Howard, and with Ed is his wife Nancy Friedberg. Next we have John Jordan, who's being presented today by Bill Thorp, and with them today is John's wife Brenda. Also we have Bill Joslin, who's being presented today by Charlie Blanchard, and with Bill is his wife Mary Joslin and son Will Joslin. Next honoree is George Newsome, and here today presenting for George is Sam Leader. And finally, we're honoring Ed Paschal, who unfortunately cannot be with us today, and presenting for him is Robert McMillan. Thanks, Robert. And without further ado, I'll ask Wright Dixon to come to the podium and give us a few remarks about Ruffin Bailey.
James Ruffin Bailey returned to the United States after flying the hump from India to China in the Army Air Corps, ending his career as a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Air Force Reserve. He entered law school and was admitted to the bar in 1949. It was the beginning of an auspicious career in diverse fields of practice of law. He represented corporate clients, the needy and the aged, all with equal distinction. He's an exemplary lawyer whom we all admire, but don't always emulate. Ruffin believes that being a lawyer includes a duty to the community, which he has fulfilled in his 50 years of practice. The Scoutmaster of 244 for 10 years, remembered by his Scouts with pride and favor. His leadership in his church, whose continued service on the vestry often as junior senior warden, has remained constant through his adult life. In his public service, he served with distinction as senator in the legislature for 4 sessions. One of the leaders in the introduction of compulsory insurance in North Carolina. He was appointed chairman of the Courts Commission in 1971 and diligently worked for years for court and judicial reform in North Carolina. Under his leadership, the legislature created mandatory retirement for judges, an improved judicial retirement system, and seriously considered a proposed merit selection of judges program. As a result of his efforts in the courts and judicial field in North Carolina, he was called on by the American Judicature Society to present these concepts and solutions to other states for their consideration. Presentations were made in South Carolina, Alabama, and Texas. This latter effort resulted in his being awarded the Herbert Lincoln Harley Award for contributions to the administration of justice through the court system by the American Judicature Society. Ruffin has also served on the Education Commission, was president of the Raleigh Rotary Club, a board member of the North Carolina Citizens for Business and Industry, and the Raleigh Chamber of Commerce. His dealings in court and out have always been with courteousness and charity for the views of others, a man who has remained personally unselfish, yet immovable when he believed he was right. It's a privilege and a personal pleasure that I present to you not only a lawyer's lawyer, but a man's man, Ruffin Bailey.
Thank you very much, Wright. Now I'll ask Chuck Neely to please come and tell us a little bit about Tom Ellis.
I'm honored today to be able to recognize our law partner, Tom Ellis, who had to be dragged here under duress for this recognition. He commented it was nice to have survived 50 years, but he wasn't sure that he deserved recognition for that. So I think marks as much as anything the modesty of one of the most remarkable men that I have known. Henry Mitchell and I were talking earlier that 50 years doesn't sound as long now as it used to sound. In my almost 30 years of practice with our firm of Malton, Taylor, and Ellis, I have met and practiced law with and against a number of remarkable lawyers, but I will tell you none are more remarkable than Tom Ellis. Born in California, educated at the Hill School and the University of North Carolina, commissioned into the Navy in World War II, where he served for 3 years, including a stint aboard the USS Moosehead. A graduate of the University of Virginia Law School, a former assistant U.S. attorney with Armstead Maupin and T. Taylor, organized the firm of Maupin, Taylor, and Ellis in 1962. Practiced as a trial and courtroom lawyer in a wide variety of complex criminal and civil cases during his career. Recruited Jesse Helms to run for the U.S. Senate in 1972 and managed his first 4 successful campaigns, and then recruited John East and Watt Faircloth and managed both of their successful campaigns. Did not manage Senator Faircloth's last campaign. Married to the former Jeanette Hood for 55 years, probably ought to be recognized as much as he, or more than he. The father of 2 children and grandfather of 7, and as devoted a family person as you will ever know in your life. Finally, a faithful parishioner and leader of St. Timothy's Episcopal Church in Raleigh. These are bare facts, and while they tell you something about Tom Ellis, they really don't tell you the essence of his character. I called my retired partner, T. Taylor, and asked him to give me some thoughts, and he thoughtfully wrote a letter, a portion of which I'm going to read to you in describing Tom Ellis. He is completely honest and does not understand people who attempt to compromise between right and wrong. With him, there are black and white, but no gray. He has an excellent mind and a high intelligence. His keen understanding of people is an important factor in his ability as a trial lawyer. Few cross-examiners possess his uncanny knack of knowing when to stop. He has a very good idea of what most cases are worth and negotiates from a position of strength. Mr. Taylor continued in his letter, However, it is perhaps his political acumen for which he is best known. In a column about him several years ago, Evans and Novak expressed the opinion that he has one of the best political minds in America. They gave him the major credit for the election of Ronald Reagan, who in the 1976 primary contest for the Republican presidential nomination had not won a state and was on the verge of quitting, when under the leadership of Mr. Ellis, and I remember this well, he carried North Carolina and then Texas, which called for his help, and came within a few votes of unseating President Gerald Ford. What he acquired and built on in '76 led to the election of President Reagan in 1980. I asked several of our law partners for comments about him, and they said some nice things. A few of the stories were unprintable, and I won't go into those now. But I will say this. As Mr. Taylor pointed out, he is remarkable for his integrity, for his intelligence, and his political savvy. But I'd add two more characteristics. One is his intensity, whether it's in the trial of a case, the waging of a political campaign, or on the golf course. I've never known anyone who has more ability to focus on the task at hand than does Tom Ellis. And finally, his friendship and loyalty to his family, to his law partners, to his firm, and as a mentor of young lawyers. He has enthusiastically and selflessly worked to develop the skills of lawyers with whom he's had the opportunity and who've had the opportunity to work with him, and has helped them to succeed in life. He is truly a remarkable lawyer, a remarkable man, a selfless public servant in what he has done, and a wonderful friend, and a great member of this bar. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Chuck. And now our friend Roy Davis from Asheville is going to come and give us a few remarks about Richard Ford.
I appreciate your folks letting me come down here from Asheville and tell you about Dick Ford. I may know some things you don't know. And I believe I'm playing a unique role. I think all of you other folks are members of this bar who are making announcements. And I'm glad to see Wright Dixon up here. I used to be president of the state bar behind him. I've been following that guy around for all my life. And I'm still following him. When I first considered this matter, I thought I knew all about Dick Ford because I've known him for almost 40 years. Then I started preparing for this thing, and it's sort of like checking your own genealogy. You learn a lot of things you're surprised about and a few that you're sort of ashamed of. So this is what I learned about Mr. Ford. He's been masquerading for over 6 decades as a Southerner, when in fact he's another damn Yankee. He was born in the essentially Yankee town of Providence, Rhode Island, moved with his family to Asheville when he was about 5 years old, and been a loyal Tar Heel since then. His mother died when he was young, and like Abraham Lincoln, he was blessed with a stepmother who he admired and who loved him and influenced him to get a good education and to enter the legal profession. The defining event of his life occurred when he was 11 years old. That's when he was blinded in a childhood accident. And since that date until this day, his life has been a program of continuing education to assist him in communicating with others and in being of service to others and to his community. This education started here in Raleigh with the State School of the Blind, where he spent 8 years. He then went to Chapel Hill, finished in 3 years. And to my great surprise, listen to this, he was Phi Beta Kappa, Vice President of the student body, and Order of the Golden Fleece. Never knew that about you, Dick. Actually, never expected it. He moved and he ascended, you might say, from Chapel Hill to as far up the geography as Cambridge, Massachusetts, and attended Harvard Law School. Then returned to Asheville and practiced for 36 years in Asheville, and of course that's where I came to know him. He was always a solo, I think, practitioner, but he always practiced in an office arrangement with some other attorney. Some of them well known. With 5 minutes I can't talk about it, but one of them was Claude Love, who had his own law school up there. Another was Harry Martin, whom all of you know, who was also a fellow student with Dick when he was at Harvard. He was married in Asheville to Majo DiNardo. They have 2 children. They are with us today. Lucy and Robert have already been recognized, and we're glad to have you with us. He was active in community activities there in Asheville on the board of one of the major hospitals, Physical Legal Services, the Legal Aid Society. He was the chair of Handy Skills, which operates a program for significantly handicapped folks. And he also was on the advisory commission for the North Carolina Commission for the Blind. I got to know him when we both sang in the choir at the Trinity Episcopal Church there. His wife was the choir director. He always claimed to sing baritone or bass, but I've never heard anybody sing that high, singing baritone. I think he's a tenor, and he just won't admit it. So you might say that's 2 things I'm ashamed of. What you have here is another Yankee tenor who went to Harvard. And that's hard to overcome if you're a lawyer in the mountains. But I think he successfully did that, and since 1984, Dick has been a member, a deputy commissioner on the Industrial Commission. He has conducted hearings in 80 or 90 of the counties of the state. I know that's been a great satisfaction to him, and that's been a great service to the people of the state. I'll close with a couple of interpretive remarks about Dick. I mentioned that his life has been an effort to educate himself. I'll give you an example of that. He's moved from the Braille system of communication to now being really a master of a computer system. He combines the ordinary computer technology with something called a voice synthesizer so that his computer talks back to him. And he can access all the literature that's available now on the database. Much more self-sufficient, much more efficient system that he would commend to others who have his experience of blindness. Secondly, I think he's a person of extraordinary strength. You can tell he's a horse from looking at him, but I know that he has great inner strength. I think of myself, when I have a bad hair day, I start fussing at my secretary and my family, and I make the judge mad. I've seen this guy in all kinds of situations of stress, and I've never seen him complain. I've never heard one remark that suggests any self-pity. He simply has stamina and strength that seem to be unlimited. In fact, that strength leads me to close this way with sort of a biblical image. I'm thinking of Moses and the Israelites, and the Israelites are moving over across the Jordan into the Promised Land, and Moses is last seen climbing Mount Pisgah. And you know, we've got a Mount Pisgah in Asheville there. So I'm convinced that when time comes for Dick Ford to cast off his mortal coil, that we're going to see him show up in Asheville, and he'll be last looking for the afterlife, climbing Mount Pisgah, not in the Holy Land, but in Buncombe County, North Carolina, and that he will thereby achieve, at long last, status as a true Southern.
Thank you, Roy. Now we're asking Kate or Howard to come up and talk to us a little bit about Ed Friedberg.
I have the dubious pleasure of speaking to you about what may be one of the best kept secrets of the Wake County Bar Association, Ed Friedberg. Why a secret? Well, for most of Ed's 50 years, he practiced by himself. Contrary to what some of you who have known him for a long time may think, it's not because no one else could stand to practice with him, but just simply he chose to be a solo practitioner. The last 10 years, he's been affiliated with our firm, and that has been a tremendous joy and pleasure and the source of so many rich rewards to us that I could take a much longer time to speak about that. But you've already met Ed's wife, Nancy. I asked Nancy prior to today what she attributed her and Ed's long and happy marriage to. She said they had a very common bond. They were in love with the same man. Now, those of you who have known Ed, particularly during the time of his former first marriage, will perhaps be amused if I describe him as a model husband. But don't be overly impressed with that, because if you check Webster's, a model is considered a small replica of the real thing. Ed is something of a miracle worker. The first 45 years he practiced, he never kept a time slip. And yet he's been tremendously successful. Let me step back in time just a second and give you a brief biographical sketch. Like so many other graduates of Duke University, he comes from New Jersey. Not the same way that many have come. Ed came by way of the gridiron. He was a football star growing up in Atlantic City. He was known as Tiger Friedberg. Coach Wallace Wade heard about him, recruited him, offered him a scholarship, and he came south to Durham. Now, it has to be noted, he asked me not to tell you this, but his football career didn't last too long at Duke. It seems that 160-pound New Jersey linemen don't fare too well against 225-pound coal miner sons from Pennsylvania and West Virginia. And his football career was perhaps as short at Duke as, if he were speaking, he would say Carolina's recent NCAA appearance. I'm a Tar Heel fan. If you wonder. But he continued his way at Duke, like so many others. Left undergraduate school to fight for his country. Became a very proud member of the United States Marine Corps and saw a lot of heavy fighting in the Pacific. If you really want to get his goat, suggest, as I did on one occasion, that the Marine Corps has now been made tactically irrelevant by the invention of the helicopter. He doesn't find that the least bit amusing. But the war was over, he came back, he finished his undergraduate studies, he went to law school at Duke, and then he headed north to join the Justice Department and litigate cases for the Internal Revenue Service. He did that for several years, and he came back south. Now, I doubt that very many of you know that Ed Friedberg was the first lawyer in Creedmoor. Unfortunately, his time practicing in Creedmoor lasted about as long as his football career at Duke. But what you may not know, and I'm serious when I say this because I think it says something about his character, why he was run out of Creedmoor. He was run out of Creedmoor because he had the temerity in 1950 of insisting on addressing several minority witnesses as Mr. during the course of a criminal trial. And that's a true story. And the mayor of Creedmoor was his landlord, and he evicted him the next week and sent him out of Creedmoor. Well, Creedmoor's loss was Raleigh's gain. As many of you perhaps know, he came to Raleigh and started and developed a very successful practice, primarily defending criminal tax fraud cases and taking on the IRS year after year after year. He became very accustomed to victory and became very gracious in victory. It took a long while, but this is a true story. He suffered his first defeat and was so gracious in defeat that he sent a 5-foot-high wreath of flowers to the Justice Department, worthy of the Kentucky Derby winner, that had the card on it that said, "Congratulations, you blankety blank, you finally beat me." True story, Ed? He's had a string of successes. If I had to just pick out 3 things, and that's difficult, first of all, I would speak of what a marvelous storyteller and source of wisdom he is. I know my time is about up, but let me just tell you one quick story. And I was going to leave this out, and Robert McMillan said, "You got to talk about Friedberg's goats." He and Nancy used to have goats that lived off Lake Boone Trail. And it seems that one particular year, Ed came home, and Nancy told him she had been contacted by the Baptist minister who wanted to use their goats in a nativity scene. And he said, "What did you say?" And she said, "Well, of course I told him he could." He says, "He ain't going to use my goats." And she said, "Well, Ed, I've already told him." He said, "You've got to let him use the goats." He says, "No, I'll take care of it." So he calls the Baptist minister and tells the Baptist minister that his wife was mistaken, that these goats cannot be used in the nativity scene.
And the minister says, well, Mr. Friedberg, we'll take good care of those goats. We'll treat them just like they're members of your family. We know they are. He says, hey, you don't understand. These are Jewish goats. They ain't going to be in no nativity scene. And they were. The second thing that I would leave you with about Ed Friedberg is what a tireless fighter for his clients he is. Like so many of our other honorees, I'm sure, and so many people who've been honored by this association in the past, when his clients are stuck, he bleeds for them. He doesn't know the meaning of namas when it comes to representation of his clients. In closing, I would say we have honored Ed as our firm patriarch, and that is not simply a designation for someone we expect to pick up the check, even though he frequently does. We revere him as a person of great wisdom, as a person of great stature, and that the title is perhaps well-deserved, is certainly well-deserved. And Ed, maybe you'll be someday in a long time chasing up Mount Pisgah with Mr. Ford. But in closing, he is a person who has eschewed the paths that have been set by others and has blazed his own trail. And Ed, we congratulate you on your 50 years of law practice.
Thank you, Cater. We're glad to have Bill Thorp with us today, and he's going to tell us a little bit about John Jordan.
It's really great to be back in Wake County. I moved to Chapel Hill a few years ago, and I just did not know how much I was going to miss my friends at the Raleigh Bar. And it's especially wonderful for me to be here to honor John Jordan. John's one of my heroes and has been for 45 years. He's a remarkable person. I checked his resume and it's awesome. And so I'll just hit the highlights. John's first and foremost a lawyer. He has argued cases everywhere from the justice of the, in every court, from the justice of the peace, right on up to the United States Supreme Court, where he appeared 3 times. He has been a trial lawyer. For the first 20-some years, he was mainly a trial lawyer. He was a lobbyist. He was, the legislators named him as the most effective lobbyist for 10 years straight, as I recall. He's a business lawyer, and he's in the Bar Association Hall of Fame for general practitioners. John's second love is higher education. He has rendered unbelievable service to the state of North Carolina in the field of higher education. He was on the Board of Governors of the University of North Carolina for 23 years, longer than any other person. He was chairman of the Board of Governors for 4 years. He was on the North Carolina Higher Education Facilities Commission for some 32 years. And after being chairman of the board of UNC, which had maybe 150,000 constituent students, John became chairman of the board of trustees of Chowan College in his home county, Hertford, and saved them from bankruptcy. I'm not sure whether it's out of his own pocket or with help from others, but he saved them from bankruptcy and put them back on the road to recovery. John has not forgotten where he came from. He was raised in Woodland, and he has an abiding love for Hertford County, northeastern North Carolina, and the rich historic lore of that region. As a young man, he was president of the North Carolina Young Democrats. John must have been born with a gavel in his hand, because every organization he belonged to, it seemed that he came to be president. He was in the Senate, North Carolina Senate, for 3 terms. In 1964, he ran for governor, and I think would have been the lieutenant governor. I think he would have been the lieutenant governor had not the former governor, Scott's son, Bob, decided to run and split John's constituency down the middle. Oh, maybe a little more. I think he would have been lieutenant governor and probably governor. But he realized that he couldn't hold political office, or that high political office. Being a lawyer was the highest secular calling in our society, and devoted himself to that, to the practice. And even though Bob Scott beat him, John served in a wonderful way under Bob Scott. Bob asked him if he would take the chairmanship of the Board of Social Services, State Board of Social Services, which had to be revamped, and John did, and they did revamp it. Scott offered him a judgeship, which he declined. John's also, well, he's really, y'all know he's really brilliant. And he's a great historian, particularly political philosophy. Political history. He loves politics and the history of politicians and government. And it amazes me of the information he has. He's a great preservation devotee, and he has restored more houses and buildings and created more museums than most anybody I know. He bought the original post office in Woodland, and in Winton, I was thinking of Judge William H.S. Burgwin. In Winton, excuse me, Hertford County. He bought that original post office and restored it, and now it's a museum. And he's restoring, I think, his grandmother's house and building a presidential library with books, all the books about the presidents, by the presidents, which is really going to be a wonderful thing. John has been a friend and confidant of at least 3 governors. He was a friend of Adlai Stevenson, Harry Truman. He's a friend of Jimmy Carter's. He has, I was looking at his CV, and I noticed about 6 presidencies or chairmanships of statewide organizations. As I said, this is the board, the university, the American Red Cross, the Cancer Society, Arthritis Society. He's just rendered tremendous service over his lifetime. I checked, I saw about 8 Distinguished Service Awards from a great variety of organizations. John is a terrific lawyer, a philosopher, a raconteur, a great friend, and a wonderful human being. I'm honored to present you, John, at your 50-year service.
Thank you, Bill. It's good to have you back in Raleigh. And now, to tell us a little bit about Bill Joslin, we'll have Charlie Blanchard come.
Thank you, Louis. Ladies and gentlemen, when George Bernard Shaw was 90 years old, he was interviewed by a young reporter, and when the interview was over, He said, Mr. Shaw, shall we meet together in 10 more years? Whereupon Shaw looked him over and says, well, son, you look in pretty good shape. I don't see why not. So we have a lot of patriarchs here today, but I believe a lot of them will go on for a long time. Many of you know William Joslin. You know about his prodigious work habits, his contributions to his church, community, state, and union, his distinguished service to our profession in many significant areas, and his love of nature, horticulture, birds, and history. I've heard it said by lots of people that Bill had elected to do something besides practice law, he could easily have been an outstanding naturalist or a professional historian. Let me hit a few of the specific highlights of his career. He received his BA from UNC, class of 41. During World War II, he served as a young officer aboard a destroyer, which was credited with bringing down 9 kamikazes. After the war, he attended Columbia University School of Law, where he was the editor-in-chief of the Law Review. Thereafter, he served as clerk to the U.S. Supreme Court Justice Hugo Black. Over the course of his legal career in Raleigh, beginning in 1949, he served as a member of the North Carolina General Statutes Commission, as a member and chairman of both the Wright County and State Board of Elections, as president of this Bar Association, as president of the NC Nature Conservancy, as chairman of the UNC Public Television Board, as a member and chairman of the NC Heritage Trust Board, and as veteran member and senior warden of Christ Episcopal Church. As you can easily see, he was the worthy recipient of the Wake County Bar Association Professional Award a few years ago. Now, in the era of the Rambo lawyer, we understandably hear much about the need for civility, professionalism, and adherence to high ethical standards. CLE courses, seminars, and calls from our highest judges are rightfully focused on these subjects. But if there's any lawyer among us who really doesn't need these courses, it's Bill. He was born to be civil and ethical and good. No lecture, no admonition, no test on these subjects were ever needed in his case. Because high above his erudition and services is a great reservoir of love that resides in his heart. Love of God, of his family, of his clients, and even of his adversaries. Some of you may also know about the faith and courage he showed when he recently faced 2 life-threatening assaults on his health. He never once gave up, and here he is back with us, hale and hearty, with these troubles on the run, and we pray decisively defeated. Bill, we are proud of you. We salute you on this occasion, and it's just so good that you and your family could be with us.
Thank you very much, Charlie. And now we'll ask Sam Leaguer to come up and tell us a little bit about George Newsome. Certainly, sir.
George H. Newsome is a North Carolina lawyer who, for most of the 50 years that he's been a licensed attorney, has kept his light, bright though it has been, somewhat concealed under a bushel known as the Trust Department of the Raleigh office of the Wachovia Bank and Trust Company. He went to work for the Wachovia Trust Department in Raleigh immediately following his graduation from Duke University School of Law in 1948. And he remained with the Trust Department in Raleigh until his retirement in 1987. During that time, he served variously as head of the tax department and head of estate administration, and also handled many important corporate trust matters such as mergers and acquisitions and reorganizations. Since retiring from Wachovia Bank, he has practiced law from his home office in the field of wills, trusts, and estate administration. He is still actively practicing in these areas. George is a native of Edgecombe County. He attended public schools there and graduated from the Tarboro City High School in 1939. Following his graduation from high school, he went to work for Tom Pearsall of Rocky Mount and then entered the United States Navy in 1942. Serving mostly in the Caribbean area, he was an NCO in intelligence and also attended the V-12 officer training program at Duke. After discharge from the Navy, he entered Duke University Law School, from which he graduated in 2 years with a JD degree in 1948. During his later Wachovia career, he also attended the Graduate School of Banking at Rutgers University. George has been active in the civic life of Raleigh as a member and officer of the Raleigh Civitan Club. He is also a longtime member of the Ridge Road Baptist Church, having served in many capacities of leadership. He has the unique distinction of having been chair of 3 pastoral search committees, 2 at Ridge Road and 1 at another Baptist church in Raleigh. He and his wife, Lorraine, have 2 children, George Jr. of Charlotte and Deborah Newsome Smith of Winston-Salem. They are proud grandparents of 5 grandchildren. George is I've known George since he came with the Wachovia. I happened to be working for the Trust Department of the Wachovia at that time, and we were glad to see George. He's an unassuming but very careful and very effective lawyer in whatever he undertakes, and it is a pleasure to know. It's my pleasure and honor to honor George upon his 50th anniversary of being a lawyer.
Thank you very much, Sam. And now, last but not least, we'll have Robert McMillan come and tell us a little bit about Ed Paschal.
Among the 50-year lawyers to be honored today, we include the name of Edward Paschal. He was born in the town of Wake Forest in 1921, the son of the distinguished historian and longtime classics professor at Wake Forest College, Dr. George W. Paschal. He is a member of a large and brilliant family known by generations of students at Wake Forest. For me, there are many Paschal memories. I cite only 2. Many times I heard my father say that he was in Dr. Paschal's class in the early 1900s when Dr. Paschal proudly announced that the students could have a few days off while he went to South Carolina to get married. In my own case, among numerous other Paschal memories, are the wonderful experiences I shared with Ed's sister, Laura Helen Paschal, one of my favorite all-time teachers, who was on the faculty of Needham Broughton High School during my student days. Ed grew up in the town of Wake Forest and graduated from the college there in 1942. He then went into the Army, serving as a lieutenant with the 4th Division from 1943 to 1946. During his military service, he participated in the Normandy invasion in June of 1944, landing on Utah Beach on June 6, 1944. After his Army service, he returned to Wake Forest Law School, graduating with an LLB degree in 1948. Since that time, he has practiced law in Wake Forest and in Lewisburg. For a period, he practiced with the late Hill Yarborough. For a time, he and his sister Catherine, also a lawyer, worked together. During his career, he served as town attorney for Youngsville and for Roseville. For a period of 10 years, he was solicitor of the Wake Forest Recorder's Court and later served that court as judge. Ed and his wife, the former Marguerite Bishop, have one son, Richard Allen Paschal, who also has a law degree among his credits. Ed is a lawyer who has practiced his profession with dignity, dedication, and integrity. He has, throughout his 50 years of practice, served his community and his profession with the same sense of devotion as that with which he served his country during World War II. I am honored to be present today, and I'm honored to have been asked to present these remarks outlining the life and career of my friend Ed Paschal.
Thank you, Robert. Due to our time limitations, after we adjourn today, in just a moment, we're going to ask our honorees to come forward to the front of the stage for a presentation of plaques and also photographs with family members, but we're going to do that after we adjourn. Right now, I'd like for everyone to please stand and recognize all of our 50-year attorneys today. Thank you. And their presenters and their family members for being here today as part of our program. I just have a couple of very quick announcements, and then we'll